afternoon and welcome to the regular council meeting, Monday, August 10th, 2026. And the time is 5 p.m. This meeting is now called to order. We respectfully acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the unceded ancestral territory of the Silks, Okanagan peoples, and the Splatsin of the Secwepemc Nation. Just before we move to the adoption of the agenda, there's one late item, number 4.8. Water conservation update provided by Mr. Ackerman. I'd like to add that. If nobody has any objections to that, then I will require a motion that the August 10th, 2026 regular council meeting agenda be adopted as amended. Thank you, Councillor Todd. Second, Councillor Wayner. All those in favor? And that will be carried. And next, we'll be looking for an adoption of the minutes that the regular council meeting minutes, July 20th, 2026, be adopted as circulated. Moved by Councillor Bellstar, thank you. And second, Councillor Nietzsche. And all those in favor? And this too shall be carried. Moving right along, we'll be looking at our presentation of reports under 4.1, the development variance permit application. The report by Ms. Cordell.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a development permit application. Chantel, could you scroll down to the maps for me, please? To create, oh, too far. Yeah. There we go. For 3785 Murray Road. So this application, well, not this application. The overall application is for a subdivision that will create 6 new residential parcels, a park, and a remainder parcel. The application before council tonight is just to vary the road width for the cul-de-sac for the new parcels. So the applicant is requesting that the road width be varied so that the shallow utilities, instead of being on city-owned boulevard in the front of the residence yard, instead they will be on a statutory right-of-way owned by the residents. That just makes their yards deeper, and it's the applicant's wish to have a 30-meter depth yard for the parcels. I have circulated this through our regular referral channels. I've received no concerns back. We've mailed and delivered letters regarding the variance and have received no responses to that. And I don't see any concerns coming from this. Functionally, it will look the same as a regular road. We just won't own the boulevard. It'll be owned by the individual landowners. So my recommendation today is that development variance permit application 26-007 DVP to vary subdivision servicing bylaw 1570 schedule J 2.01 18-meter right-of-way urban local road cross-section by reducing the road right-of-way width to 13.7 meters and by creating a right-of-way of 2.15 meters across the property frontages to accommodate the shallow utilities for subdivision application 26004 sub at 3785 Murray Drive, legally described in that resolution, be approved.
Thank you, Ms. Cordell. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Bellstar, seconded by, sorry, way down the end there, Councillor Wayner. And any questions? Yes, Councillor Wayner.
My understanding is this will go back to, the council probably won't see this project again. So one quick comment I had is there's one large lot adjacent to the park there. And I'm curious if there would be a possibility of the property owner were to come forward with a park there, would they be able to maybe unlock that land that's cornered there?
Through your worship to Councillor Rainer. Chantel, could you bring the map back so we can see it? So those are currently developed right now. I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around.
The lots themselves look like they'd be locked into the parcel, and looks like this would butt right up against it. Is that my own?
No, so, can you zoom in on the ortho photo, the aerial photo? So where this will be is all, do you see the driveway there? So the driveway creates some space in between those two adjacent lots. And this development will all be on the east side of that driveway. So it doesn't actually come up to those lots exactly, except maybe at the very point at the corner. Am I understanding that correctly? Is that?
I think so. I was
So-
looking at, okay, so yeah, it's in a slightly, it's just slightly off of that area.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Another question was under section 499, unrelated to this development. I've had some people ask me in the past just about the 10-day notice period and being able to get home. I'm just curious about why it's the way it is, and if it's the same across municipalities, and just what the rationale for that might be.
Thank you, Councillor Rayner, through your worship. The 10-day notice period is specified in the Local Government Act, and it's very specific that it has to be 10 days in advance of council consideration. I'm not sure what the logistics was of them putting it in the Local Government Act, but it does apply to every municipality, and I think regional districts have the same across the province. So we're just following what's kind of set out for us in the legislation.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Drapala.
And I just had a question about, it looks like there's like a water course in there, right? And I'm sure it's ephemeral in nature. Is that, like, does it exist? It looks like it does. It looks like through the aerial photo there. And then also, I guess just on mapping, it looks like it runs maybe just in periods of high water, and I guess my question is, have we done do we have anything that accounts for that, or will the riparian areas apply to that one particular property that looks like it cuts across at the top corner, lot 6? And I just don't, if the riparian areas does apply to that lot, does that still work for that subdivision?
Through your worship to Councillor Drapala, that actually, the waterway enters the storm system on the parcel to the north, so it doesn't actually have a waterway across that parcel, even though it shows water moving. We just actually, because the parcel to the north recently subdivided, we kind of reviewed all of that and ensured that the waterway was taken care of into the storm there.
Perfect. That's what I was wondering. It just looks like the vegetation is still there for the waterway. So, thank you.
And I just had one question. This project being different, a little bit different, the roadway will be owned by the residences, the infrastructure, correct? The cul-de-sac roadway?
Sorry, your worship. No, the roadway itself will be public. What they will own is the land that the shallow utilities, so like the electrical, the Fortis, and any telecommunications in the boulevard, so just in the grassy area beside the road, will be owned by them with a statutory right-of-way that we hold on it.
Thanks, that answers my question. Was there any further questions? Seeing none, then I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that will be carried. Next is 4.2, notice of motion, read the good neighbor bylaw applicability. And this report will be from Councillor Todd.
I'm not 100% on how to present this, but I think I'll just start with back in the mist, in the sands of time. In 2008, there was an issue. The city wanted some property. The city took the property. The city maintained that property over the last 18 years. And last year decided it wasn't going to maintain that property anymore after doing some work to it to make it less maintainable. And the property owners have asked that we reconsider that. And I'd like to move this motion, if I may, that council direct staff to report back to a future council meeting on the applicability of section 4.4 of the Good Neighbor Bylaw to 2485 Okanagan Street regarding an assessment on whether the boulevard maintenance requirements apply to the property.
Thank you, Councillor Nietzsche. Is there any discussion?
You know what? I'd love to get this done tonight. I know we can't. I know it has to come to I personally think this is so cut and dried that we don't even have to waste staff time on having a report, but I know we got to, and I know that that's the way we have to do it. Because as I've said a million times, the wheels of government grind slowly. So I understand that these are the hoops we must jump through. But I urge council to realize that this really is black and white. And I think we can do this at the next meeting. I'm sure we'll be able to satisfy our residents.
I have a couple of questions regarding that, because I think it's part of a larger problem, and this may be a specific issue in a specific place in an specific incident. But nobody's given me an explanation of exactly what it is. I've heard about this, and I've heard about this several times. What is the issue? What is the problem? I drove by, I'm looking at the front of the residence. We own that now. Is that, as I understand?
Yeah, if you want, your worship, I'll give you a quick rundown.
Yeah,
It was
please.
like the city wanted the property for a road allowance, is my understanding, back in 2000 and in the early 2000s. The homeowner didn't want to give the property up. When in 2008, he required that the circumstances required that he subdivide his property, and he sold a chunk on the back end on the foot of Dunn Street to subdivide that to John and Janet Irby. They bought that, built a house. He allowed the city to have more buildings built and more residents living here. And at which point there was a handshake agreement that the city took the property. He had a retaining wall on it that made it easier to maintain. City took that out, put a slope in, plowed the snow from Van Cleek on it occasionally, when we haven't had much snow the last few years. And over the last 18 years, whatever it was, the city maintained it. Weed whacked it twice a year, whatever it happened to be. And then last year decided they weren't going to do it anymore because it didn't fit into whatever the work plans were. By taking out the retaining wall, they made it harder to do. So the homeowners, aging out as we all are, it's harder for him to do it personally. It's a slope like this, runs the slope. There's a fire hydrant and a water intake or water turn-off switch there. So even as the city wasn't maintaining it this year, they went up and still weed whacked a meter-long strip up the sidewalk so that they could get to the fire hydrant, but left the rest up the slope. So I just think that the good neighbor part of the policy applies to the city as well, that and I'm not saying this applies to every property in town. I just think that the precedent was set. It's a handshake agreement that's again lost in the sands of time, but it was there. I think if we grandfather this property in, if he ever changes the property use and or sells it, then it's on to the next owner. But I think it's the least we can do is just twice a year weed whack it for the dude. That's what I think.
I do support the motion. I just didn't understand what the concern and the complaint was, and not having the history that many of you do here. I didn't know what it used to look like, and I look at it now and I'm thinking, I can't see plowing snow up onto a hill like that. It's just going to roll back down onto the road. Like, to me, it just didn't seem to make any sense. So thanks for that explanation, Councilor Todd and Councilor Feller.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's probably a lot of handshake deals that were made in the past. It was just kind of a way of doing business years ago, and things are a little bit different now where we have all our rules and regulations and everything in place. And I think that, we really need to take a look at some of these things and be fair to the residents as well as be fair to the city. So I'm fully in favor, it doesn't matter either way. I'm in favor of having this come back to us for a decision.
Councilor Nietzsche.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Back 2008, my memory's a little foggy, but I still remember some of these issues when we were doing road improvements along Okanagan Street. And I remember that this was also an issue along Rosedale and Morey. I believe there was similar type, agreements that were entered into. And unfortunately, in small communities, sometimes we don't paper over with agreements that last as long as some of us around here will remember. So, I think ultimately we need to honor agreements as a city, whether they be written or informal. But, I look forward to seeing the staff report and understanding a little bit of the history, but I think I'll be leaning towards, as long as it is the same owner that we had originally made the agreement with way back in 2008, then we should be honoring that. And that's just part of being a good neighbor. So anyways, I look forward to receiving the report and we'll have some more discussion.
Any further comments? Great, then when it's first and seconded, we will call the vote. All those in favor? And that will be carried. 4.3, the non-farm use resolution at 3990 Pleasant Valley Road. And Ms. Cordell, you're up again. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is an application that the city is making to the Agricultural Land Commission in relation to our proposal to try and put a trailhead at the BC Hydro property just off the off-ramp coming into Armstrong. CAO Cybel's been in discussion with BC Hydro for some time, and we're moving forward on the leasing process. But one of the requirements is that we get approval from the ALC to do this first before we can. So I have moved forward an application through the Agricultural Land Commission. Then the first step is that it bounces back to me to review and provide a council resolution and a staff report. This meets council's strategic priority of trying to get the trailhead done for the rail trail. So I'm bringing it forward to you today to endorse, hopefully, the non-farm use application to the Agricultural Land Commission. The resolution I proposed is that council supports the non-farm use application for 3990 Pleasant Valley Road for the purpose of a parking lot and trailhead for the North Okanagan Shuswap Rail Trail, and that staff forward the application to the Agricultural Land Commission for its consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Cordell. That will be moved by Councillor Fowler and a second by Councillor Valstar. Was there any question? Not seeing it. Oh, Councillor Drapla.
I think more of just a highlight or a confirmation for residents that may be looking at this for the first time. On the road that comes in, it looks like there's still allowing traffic coming off of the highway as it does now, except at the entrance to the parking lot, it's two-way traffic now. So we're not removing the ability for coming into town off of the highway, but then allowing the two-way traffic to get to the parking lot and still come off the highway.
Through your worship to Councillor Drapla, that's currently how it's proposed. Obviously, once we get into detailed design and conversations with Ministry of Transportation, things could change, but currently that is the proposal.
Thank you.
And thank you for your comments, Councillor Drapla. So, Councillor Weiner.
Yeah, I just want to confirm that we're just making a motion towards the change in land use. There's no plan on the table. That's not what we're discussing. That'll be brought forward later time. I'm just clarifying that.
Through your worship to Councillor Rayner, yes, at this time, we're just wanting to request that we can have a non-farm use on that parcel, which will allow us to secure a lease from BC Hydro and then really get into the detailed planning.
And Mr. Saddle.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to further on Councillor Winter's question, the image that you'll see in the report is somewhat rudimentary, two-dimensional, simply to be able to when I was in conversations with Hydro to get an idea of what it could look like on the site. They have some planned works on the site as well, which are delineated with the yellowish green line that runs through the hatched area on the left side of the image, with some additional power lines that they're looking at for their own use. So we just had to put something sort of quick and dirty together, but there'll be an extensive process, as Ms. Cordell said, to work through the pieces. But this was what was needed for Hydro and then also for the application to the LC.
Thank you. I believe Councillor Drapla.
And I'm also just assuming that the overlay on that is just offset a little bit from where it should be, right? Okay. Thank you.
Anything further? No, well, it's moved and seconded again, so I will call the vote. All those in favor? And this too shall be carried. Up next, section 4.4, the review and the rescind planning and building department policies. Once again, Ms. Cordell, there's a long list here. I'm not sure how you want to tackle them.
Thank you, Your Worship. That's a good question. I was thinking that we could just go through and give you highlights. The overall highlight to this is that a lot of these policies pre-existed our current development approval procedures bylaw, which this council adopted near the beginning of their term. So they've really become redundant, or they're repeated in that development approval procedures bylaw. So a lot of them aren't necessary for that reason. And then some of the others have specific. So I can go through the list really quickly and highlight them. And just to be clear, there are still a couple planning policies left, even though there's a lot of them being rescinded here. So the first one, the secondary suite rezoning applications. There's no longer a need to rezone to have a secondary suite. That was blown out of the water with the changes from the province. The liquor licensing is one of the policies that has been embedded into that development approval procedure. So it's just duplicating that. We don't need it in two places. The agricultural land exclusion policy, that one was really specific around policies that council at that time had designated to consider for exclusion. But several years ago, we went through a process with the Agricultural Land Commission, and we had conversations at council, and we've kind of embedded a slightly different direction in our new official community plan. And so it's not really relevant anymore at this time. The offsite development latecomer fee, this one is a very specific fee for new development on Fraser Road, and it's a very small, oh no, sorry, that's not this one. This one is basically a policy that says what the legislation says about how we're going to take latecomer fees. This is all outlined through the legislation. Any latecomer has to bring the bylaw forward to council for consideration anyways, so the policy itself seemed redundant. This is the one I was talking about. The voluntary capital cost contribution for Fraser Road was a $1,500 amenity fee for each new parcel along Fraser Road. I'm thinking that this pre-existed the community amenity, more comprehensive community amenity fees that we have now. And I don't see a need to have that small specific one on one specific road in our community when now we have general ones that kind of are covering everywhere, and it doesn't feel equitable to have it just on one road. Notification of building demolition. So this policy directed staff to consult with the Heritage Advisory Committee every time a building was demolished. Two pieces with this. One, that committee no longer exists. And two, it's embedded in our building review process. When we have a demolition permit, they always go over to the museum. The museum gets an opportunity to decide if they want to look at it. So we don't need a policy. This is just an operating procedure that we do with every application for demolition. Waiver of rezoning fees for heritage designation. I'm thinking at the time, people must have needed to rezone to get heritage designated. We no longer require that. You can be heritage designated in whatever zone you're in. So in the time that I've been here, we haven't seen it. Well, I don't think we'll see anybody coming forward with that. Our new zoning bylaw doesn't have a heritage zone to rezone to. The cannabis retail store policy basically is like the liquor licensing policy. It outlines the same information that's in the development approval procedures step by step. When we updated those procedures, we made sure we captured everything that was in there and embedded it into the bylaw, which is the proper tool for that. There is still a policy that we're not recommending rescinding around cannabis manufacturing, and it basically says there can't be any. And that policy we weren't going to recommend coming forward with. Public notice and consultation for development applications, that again has been rolled right into our development approval procedures bylaw, and we follow that, as well as, of course, the legislation that tells us what we need to do. This next one, service provision for BC land surveyors. So this policy basically says that we're going to make a list alphabetical of surveyors, and we're going to rotate through the list when we're hiring surveyors. This doesn't align with our current procurement policies or I think the legislation. It's not what we do in practice, and I'm not sure even why it was a planning policy. So I'm recommending we rescind that one. Building without a permit, stop work order issuances and follow-up. So we've been in the process of developing a comprehensive building bylaw enforcement policy that will come forward to council. It will address this more thoroughly, but when we went through this policy, we realized we're not following it. It's quite strict. It basically establishes a really short time frame where if we don't get compliance, the city initiates a notice on title process. Our approach now is really to work with people, and it usually takes a lot longer than 10 days to get compliance on a stop work notice. So my recommendation would be that we don't have this one because we're not following it anyways. And then when we look at that new building bylaw policy, it will talk about our approach to that, which is more gentle than this approach. Plumbing fixtures and accessory residential buildings. This one feels very specific, like somebody built a shed and tried to live in it. The building code really covers this. We're not supposed to have things above and beyond the building code. We do now allow accessory buildings to be dwelling units, so it's also inconsistent with our kind of current practices. It's not, we don't generally allow sheds, but the building code addresses what you can and can't do in your accessory building. And then the last one, building permits and plans, access to records. So this policy is outdated. We now follow the current legislation around freedom of information. We get direction, of course, from our corporate officer on what we can and can't do. And we have a defined property information request process that we're using regularly. It's got a worksheet and we have procedures that we follow every time that we do it. So this is irrelevant now. So that's pretty much all the policies. My recommendation is that council rescind all the policies on the list. Would you like me to, do I need to read them out? No. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cordell. Councilor Todd, you want to move that?
Sure.
Oh, and a second by Councilor Valstar. Thank you. And Councilor Todd, your question?
Thank you, Your Worship. About the heritage portion of that, if a property is designated heritage, there still precludes any kind of demolition. Somebody can't buy it, knock it down without going through, not the museum, I'm assuming. It would still have to come back to us, right?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Todd. So if you're oh my gosh, dedicated heritage by bylaw, there's a really strict list of things you can and cannot do. Any changes you make to the exterior of your building, you need a heritage alteration permit. I think that because we have those heritage designation bylaws that are really prescriptive, it probably replaced the need for a heritage zone. Instead, they follow the rules as laid out in that bylaw.
Great. Thank you very much.
Councilor Valstar.
Thank you very much. I wanted to just say that like seeing the policy cleanup is really cool. You know, in the 4 years that we've been here, we haven't really had like a bulk delete. And I really, the reason why I like it is because like if we're doubling up on a lot of the same rules, trying to follow all the same rules and that it gets very confusing, especially if somebody finds a bylaw that says otherwise to what we want to do. I think it's really good. And I just want to say thank you to staff.
I'm asking if I can ask this because it's a question about heritage. Is it appropriate to ask a heritage question? No, the bylaw. Okay, I get the message. I'll do it.
Was there any further questions? Not seeing any, then I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And this too shall be carried. Up next, 4.5, the Freedom of the City Report. Ms. Weiss to deliver, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Policy is the word of the night again, as you've all seen. And as part of this broader policy review, I don't have as many as Manager Cordell tonight, but I do have one for you to consider. And unlike her, I'm not recommending you rescind it, but instead I'm recommending that council updates the Freedom of the City policy. The current Freedom of the City policy is over 25 years old, and it doesn't align with many of the things that local governments are doing these days and making sure that we're following the charter and so on and so forth. The proposed policy in front of you gives greater clarification about the purpose of the award. It better aligns and modernizes the policy to match the community charter. The Freedom in the City Award, of course, is chartered, so it is a statutory award. It is the highest honor that a council can bestow upon somebody. And so I think it's prudent that it matches the community charter very closely, the policy. It establishes a clear nomination process for nominating somebody. And it, of course, refines the public presentation procedures to bring them up to speed with current practices. So then it gives that process for when that award is bestowed upon somebody. I'm happy to answer any questions about the new policy or how it compares to the old policy. With that in mind, it's my recommendation that council approves the amended Freedom of the City policy as presented in the report by myself this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chantel. Do we have somebody to move it? Councillor Nietzsche, please. Second, Councillor Fowler. I'll give you that one. And question, Councillor Nietzsche.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chantel, for the work on this project. Just absent from the report was sort of a current list of those who have the recognition of freedom of the city currently. I know that Mayor Hornby, as well as the Royal Canadian Legion. I'm just wondering if you might happen to remember when you're looking at the inventory of those, anybody else had received the recognition in the last 20 years. I think those were the two that I remember, but I'm just trying to remember if there was any others. The reason why I ask is that I asked this question from former staff previously about 3 years ago, because kind of a common practice for the Christmas party was to invite the Freedom of the City recipients to attend. For the Legion, it was just whoever was the president at the time was invited, as well as I know that Mayor Hornby and his wife Dell would attend as well, and I think Mayor Oglo might have been received it as well. So I liked that sort of tradition of inviting those who had freedom to at least come to the Christmas party every year. I was told, well, it's expensive. Well, yeah, I guess dinner might be expensive for those guys, but they also contribute an awful lot to the community and still do. So anyways, so I know it's not embedded into the policy, but just as a practice, I think it's just nice courtesy to ensure that we invite those recipients annually to the Christmas party. But other than that, I'm happy to see that we're aligning with the Local Government Act, and so it makes sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am in the middle of, and I have 4 that I've found and confirmed that have received Freedom of the City, individuals or organizations. I'm going to be putting together a pretty locked and loaded inventory of that. I'm working through it. I'm relatively new to the city, and so I'm leaning on some of my colleagues in the history and making sure we're scanning all of the files and through the records management to make sure we have that. Again, I appreciate the sentiment and the sharing that, Councillor Nietzsche, and I think that that's something I can speak with CAO Seibel about. While it's not embedded into policy, I'm certain that we can talk about something to include that in Christmas party invites or look at different ways of doing that. So thank you. I'll make sure to write it down.
Councillor Todd.
Thank you, Your Worship. Could you clarify, recipients will be advised that pursuant to community charter, individuals granted freedom of the city may receive limited statutory rights, including provisions related to municipal voting eligibility and eligibility to hold municipal office. I wasn't really sure what that meant.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Todd, for the question. I'm going, for the sake of the record, to read it straight from the community charter that I'm looking at right now so that we're clear and so that we're not giving any extraordinary rights or voting rights to recipients, but instead, again, aligning with the community charter. Somebody who is a recipient of this award is deemed to be an elector of the municipality and is eligible to be registered as such and to vote in an election for mayor or councillor. And secondly, despite any other enactment, if the person is a Canadian citizen, the person is deemed to be qualified and to be nominated to be elected and hold office on council. That's different from qualifications for everybody else, hence the reason it's in the community charter and is the highest honor. So the significance and the magnitude of the award means that they're given that opportunity. As part of my inventory with the election coming up, the former recipients get a letter each election to say you're allowed to do this. From what I can tell in my sleuthing, I haven't found somebody who has done that. So as long as somebody is a Canadian citizen, regardless of any of the other rules that are in place for elections, they're deemed to be qualified to be nominated. Okay, so it's very specific to the charter. It's not something extraordinary that a council can vary because it's chartered and it's statutory, which is actually excellent. So we have that guidance in the charter and the policy does match that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I assumed it was taking something away, but it's not. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weiss. Is there any further questions? Not seeing any, then we will call the vote. All those in favor? And this too shall carry. Up next, 4.6, the mid-year financial report. This will be delivered by CEO Seibel this evening.
Thank you, Worship. So before council this evening is an update report midway through the year and as of June 30th. Mr. Martins is away this week, so he asked me to be able to provide some comments for his report. He's provided a fairly extensive summary looking at the operational activities up until the end of June, so through the first half of the year. The report looks at the general operations, the two utilities, the capital projects up to date, but just as interestingly is the program-based pilot that we were initiating this year for operations, which is one of the attachments in his report, looking at, he's provided what that looks like in terms of how this would be going forward. So it's, from an operational perspective, things are on target. Revenues are about 49% for the general, expenses around 36. It's mostly due to some of the projects that we do incur later on in the year, but by and large, everything is on target. There's some timing differences within the two funds, the water fund and the sewer fund, as it relates to revenues, but those obviously get caught up once the billings come into place, specific to the revenue side of things. From a project perspective, all of the projects are being worked on. A lot of them have been completed. Some are in progress. The larger ones, obviously, PV Boulevard North is underway, and we'll see more of those costs come to fruition in the second half of the year. The reservoir project has just started, so again, we'll start to see more of that in the second half of the year as well. So that's why there's seems to be a larger percentage of under budget for those. Don't have too much other to add from a general perspective, unless there's specific questions about any of the operations or projects that I can answer for council. But with that, it's simply just to receive this information for information. Thank you.
That'll be moved by Councilor Wayner. We have a seconder, Councilor Valstar. Thank you. And questions? Mark, you're not going to let me down, right? All right. Well, on that note, so the motion is to receive, first and seconded. Call the question. All those in favor? And this too shall be carried. Up next is 4.7, the Rosedale Avenue intersection improvements. And once again, Mr. Seibel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Ackerman may be able to add to the conversation as we go as well here. So this is a follow-up to the direction that was provided earlier this year in terms of the funding that was included in the budget to deal with the two intersections. We engaged McElhaney to do some work at both intersections, looking at the current situation, looking at a variety of factors from sightlines to traffic volumes, speeds, those sorts of things. All of that technical information is included in the two reports that are attached. The objective behind this was to find what I had hoped was a bit of a simpler solution moving forward for how we deal with this. Not unlike Ms. Weiss's comments from the last item on the agenda. I too haven't been here long enough to know all of the history of how we got to where we are with those bollards that are on those two intersections. But what I can confidently say now is that based on the engineering report that we have, there are some very clear options that we can proceed with to advance this without causing any additional risk to the city. So as is noted in the report, the Pleasant Valley and Rosedale intersection, the primary issue there being the turning radii on the northbound lane. So that's from Pleasant Valley onto Rosedale, just the width of it. That's the way it's constructed can contribute to a lack of a reduction in speed, taking the corner a little bit quicker than most people can just because of the way it's built out. So the idea behind that is that we would look to build into a future budget some curb radii there, whether it's a rolled curb or something to try and mimic the outline of the bollards, but providing a bit of for lack of a better word, like a speed bump to slow people down as they're going through it without impeding the truck traffic that does go through there. There's some minor crosswork improvements, and there is one sign that needs to come out of there, a yield sign that was they said was still there, but all in all, it's fairly straightforward what would need to be done there. The key through that evaluation they did was that the 85th percentile of the speeds was at 50 through that intersection, which is very good. Doesn't mean there isn't speeding, just means that more likely than not, people aren't. So, which is a positive thing. Similarly at Okanagan and Rosedale, again, the turning issue with the turning radii on two sections are the problem there. So it's the eastbound and westbound approaches on Rosedale. And again, relatively straightforward fixes that we can bring forward at budget time to similarly look at, a rolled curb or similar to address the same issue for how quick people turn the corners. And the one thing of interest there that as part of the evaluation was based on the traffic information and using the tax standard, the four-way stop is not technically needed. You could convert it to a two-way stop with Rosedale as the through. The four-way has been there for quite some time. I don't know that it's necessary to change that, but it's important that council acknowledges that just to keep it as it is. And then that way the other improvements for the crosswalks and such, are status quo for that specific intersection. So with that, like I said, there's three options provided for each of the intersections as to what we can proceed with. Again, the options themselves were taken through the lens of trying to maximize the dollars for whatever improvements are needed without overbuilding it. The last thing I wanted to see happen is we spend $400,000 on an intersection improvement that's not warranted based on things that are happening. So I think the approach that has been identified here in discussions with Mr. Ackerman and the engineers that there's a couple of options that we can move forward with that are reasonable in the circumstances for both. So the recommended option is to remove all of the delineators except for those three turning radii elements between the two intersections until we can get them fixed, just as a way to try and curb the speed and stuff that could happen at those. But that'll at least get them cleaned up and have a bit of a path forward for how we can deal with the improvements and have those come back for discussion during budget. We do have some money allocated that will at least get a bit more technical details for the budget discussion in the fall in terms of implementation. But at least then we'd have a bit of a path forward for fixing and getting rid of the bollards. So.
Hallelujah. That's my initial reaction to that. But just for clarification, so you mentioned that there wouldn't be any change to the pedestrian changes there. So would those no curbs stay in place in the meantime? Because that's what instigated this whole thing, was pedestrian safety.
While Ms. Weiss is looking this, actually, we'll just look, does somebody want to, thank you for the motion, Councillor Weiner, and seconder, Councillor Fowler. All right, now we can carry on.
And I had a second question. Is that when it gets sorted out?
Do you want the explanation first, or do you want to ask the question? The recommendation. Yeah, great thought.
I don't see the curbs in there, right? Or no posts or whatever you call them.
So for that intersection, the, like I say, the, on Rosedale, if you're turning north on Okanagan, I don't know if we would remove the no posts or not, because the bollards will remain, which provide the protection against the sidewalk on both sides. And it would be similar at the other intersection. Those bollards probably could come out based on the intersection, but Brad, I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, through your worship, we would just do a continual evaluation on that. Those bollards there are to provide that additional buffer for pedestrians until they actually enter the crosswalk. As we remove, we'll have the traffic engineer do a review with us and make those recommendations. But the goal is to try and remove as much unnecessary infrastructure from the intersections at this time until we can make the permanent fix.
And I totally agree with that. I just, as long as that pedestrian safety isn't going to be compromised. Okay, and then, did you have a question on that? I have another question, but it's, it just went blank. Just a clarification of something that you said about the four-way stop, whether that would stay or whether it wasn't, and what the history was there. The history of that four-way stop was that the traffic on Rosedale was like a highway, and a young boy on the way to school on a bicycle got hit and killed. So that's where the four-way stops came in, and I certainly wouldn't like to see that changed because it does stop the traffic halfway down that speedway.
Thank you, Worship. Really happy to see these reports. Would have been nice to if our first engineer came forward with something so detailed to give us a presentation on this. But here we are, and we have the information now. And again, for residents, if you haven't read through the detailed reports in the agenda, I encourage you to. There's a lot of information there on how these recommendations came to be. I also agree with Councillor Fowler. I don't want to lose sight that this started years ago with the delegation talking about pedestrian safety in town and whether council was going to wait for something to happen before we made a decision, or if we were going to try to mitigate pedestrian safety before something happened. And that's what started us down this road. When you look at this image in particular, so that north turn onto Okanagan, you can see through here that the crosswalk doesn't actually start where the sidewalk, where the intersection starts. And so there's a long added crosswalk there. Or pedestrians are in the intersection longer than they need to be. And that's the intention of those delineators that go there. So I'm, as frustrating as they are, I'm happy to see that we've kept those in particular there to keep the pedestrian safety at the forefront. Even though it's been frustrating for the community, we're still operating on the premise, or I'm still operating on the premise of pedestrian safety. And some particular intersections that get high traffic areas or high pedestrian and car traffic from the schools throughout the school year. I think both mornings, after schools, and during lunch hours with the new drivers going to the restaurants in town. And so those are all initial considerations to this, but I'm glad that all of the data is starting to come together for this.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this, and when we talked about this last, and I was more in the favor of removing all of them, and then we decided to keep them, and then we allocated money for a traffic engineer, an expert, to look at it and put actual eyes on it and figure out the safest way forward. I'm so happy to see that we have a sensible solution coming forward. You know, something that we can all kind of get behind. And I am not a traffic engineer, but I just want to say I saw a raised curb in Kelowna on Lecky and Enterprise, I think is what it is. It's raised, it's red, it's super annoying, but I feel like that might be something that's in our future, because I feel like it actually works for the speed around a corner while allowing big trucks to hit those corners and navigate through our community. So anyways, I just wanted to say that I'm thankful to see this.
Councillor Nietzsche.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I want to thank staff for bringing back a very detailed report. I'll be honest with you, I think the council got a little too far into the weeds on this project. I think from a high level policy perspective, we are not traffic engineers, and I think that we kind of delved a little bit too deep into this project. Policy via Facebook is not good policy. I will say though that I am supportive of the recommended changes, but I want to reiterate the fact that this came as a result of council's direction to staff to improve pedestrian safety within the community. And we cannot lose sight of that. It was never, ever intended. These changes were never, ever intended to improve traffic flow, to improve speeding along our streets or anything like that. The purpose of this entire project was to slow people down and create traffic calming measures. Now, that being said, there might have been some design issues related to turning radii that are being identified here in this project, and we've done the right thing. But ultimately, I am in favor of the city continuing to look at intersection safety improvements for pedestrians throughout the community at a high level. And I hope encourage councils now and in the future to continue with that good work. Because as we all know, my daughter got hit in an intersection just last summer. And as a result of a situation that was not very safe on Wood Avenue. And I think there is still improvements, even though we were making some efforts there. I think there are still traffic calming improvements that we can do along Wood Avenue that would greatly improve pedestrian safety and active transportation safety along that corridor. So I will be supportive of this resolution, and I encourage councils now and in the future to continue to make those traffic calming measures and continue to improve pedestrian safety in the community.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think most of what I had to say has been said. However, having responded to a lot of some of the incidents with the youth in the community trying to cross the road, I have to say that I am very much in favor of making sure that we do our due diligence to make sure we protect our communities, especially our youth as they're trying to cross to school and to and from. I drove those roads almost every day for years, and the improvements from the sight lines that I've seen have been phenomenal, where vehicles are now able to see the pedestrians as they come up, whereas before it used to just be blind. So that's just my my perspective. But I do have a question though for Trevor, actually. So originally we talked about having a stakeholder engagement. I can see some reasons why there may or may not be. I'm just curious, before the design goes ahead, for things that may or may not work with trucks and different opportunities, I'm curious where that stakeholder engagement got to, or what the rationale might be for maybe a change.
So there's been no specific stakeholder engagement on these outcomes that have been presented. It would be somewhat challenging as to who you would include and exclude, I think is what we talked about before with this. Certainly when we get to the point of an intersection design, there's certain conversations we would likely have with the school district, with some of the trucking companies, that kind of thing. Council at that time could absolutely do more in terms of communication for a public meeting or something at that time, once we know what we're talking about, to get feedback on it before it's finalized. So, but there hasn't been done anything specific to this point yet.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that we do think about the stakeholder piece of the emergency services as well, for when they're making, we don't want to create something that might be easily addressed in the early stages instead of the late stages.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to echo most of my colleagues today, but I'm also going to say that this is a cautionary tale for new councils, that when something like this comes up in your first couple of months of being on council and you just okay things because you think you're supposed to okay them, and the next thing you know, there's bollards all over town, I think is a bit of an issue. So I think people should be aware that this was never about inconveniencing the populace. This was about, in our opinion, we were doing something that was going to make it safer. And I know that was always our first activity and our first thought. And I'm fully in favor of all this today. Thank you.
Yeah, just for the record, we're presented with opportunities to make a difference in the community and give direction and whatnot. But whether you've been here for a couple of months or been here for 20 years, it still you know, you see things on paper and then you figure it's all good and the professionals know what they're doing. But when you actually see it out there trying to drive around, and there's no doubt we made a mistake on how tight that radius was. Trucks could not get around that. And so just ask the questions in the council meetings before you make the decision. But also, you know, I think we have to admit when we've done something maybe just a little bit too tight. And I, for one, didn't realize it was that tight. And having these fixed might actually save my marriage.
We did tweak them though. I mean, we admitted we made a mistake fairly quickly. We jumped on it as fast as we could because we all went out and went, holy crap. Councillor Valstar and I drove around with his truck and his trailer and realized that, you know what, this isn't for everybody. A conversation I had with the mayor tonight, I mean, he has trouble making that turn in his big truck on Rosedale and Okanagan, whereas my little Hyundai, I'm around that corner in a second and a half. But it's not for everybody. So we have to make it for everybody now. And I think we've done the right thing here.
Just one other comment that I had was, there was some wording about the viewing area, and we need to have some trees and bushes and things pruned back for better visibility at the intersections. And it's if you stand in these intersections and look, it's bad. So we own that as a city, and hopefully Mr. Ackerman will be able to find some time, some staff, and to make that part of the solution as soon as possible. On that note, there's no further questions. Oh, Councilor Drapla.
Just a further comment to that. I agree with the pruning, but I also think we should make sure that we're giving those residents a heads up if we're going to be pruning their bushes instead of them having a surprise one morning when they wake up. And I'm also in favor of maintaining the four-way, even though the report recommends that we don't need it. And I just want to pull a quote out from that, is that it says, if the city isn't in favor of removing the four-way, that at least the geometric solutions, example, smaller corner radii and narrower approaches may at least reduce speeds and improve safety. So I think by maintaining that difficult corner, so like we're making some changes, we're not making changes to the corner that most people are having problems with. So I think we're going to see a mixed response to our fix to this, but it's in the lens of safety, right? And we have it in the report. That's why we started out in the first place, was down for pedestrian safety. So I think the rationales are there and backed up with data. So I'm happy with that.
Thank you, Councilor Drapla. Anybody else? Anything further? All right, on that, then we'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that will be carried. And up next, 4.8, Mr. Ackerman, our water conservation update, please.
Sorry, just to interrupt. Are we going to talk about the next intersection? Yeah. I think we just read the first resolution, did we not? I wasn't done talking about traffic.
Mover was Councillor Weiner, seconder was Councillor Fowler. And I was of the impression that everything was getting moved in one resolution. It is listed as
Let's just
and.
open
you
it
would.
up again. Did anybody have any comments or questions regarding the second intersection? Though we voted, we can always rescind that if it's a problem, but we can talk about intersection number 2 at Pleasant Valley Road and Councilor Drapla.
I just had a question on the logistics of that second intersection on PV. If we're going to remove the bollards for a northbound turn from Rosedale onto PV, the stop sign has now been moved out into the roadway. So would we have to move that back onto the sidewalk or wherever it was before? I can't even remember. But there would have to be some undoing of stuff more so than just removing the bollards there.
Wanted to say, I think when I went by today and had another look, that the actual, the post to put the stop sign in is still there and open to replace it back to its original position.
Yeah, through your worship, we do have the ability to go through and make those modifications and return stop bars and stop sign locations. We'll do that with the lens of keeping the sight lines as best we can for traffic coming from either side as well. So it will take a little bit of work to reconfigure, but we'll do that in consultation with our traffic engineer, and hopefully, depending on resource allocation, try and get things cleaned up before the return of school, just to prevent any disruption.
Councilor Draplin.
If council's agreeable, I'd like to add another motion to the one that we already passed to include in the budgeting process the upgrades to the crosswalk at that intersection that were suggested in the report. So I think it was something about,
So we will, yes, we will make it a separate motion. It's just easier and cleaner.
yeah, for sure.
And then so we'll go with that. Ms. Weiss is working her magic over there. We'll just wait
So
till we
then-
hear what she has to say.
My motion, can I make that motion then?
Thank you for the record, please, Councillor Draplin.
Okay.
I would appreciate.
So my motion would be to include in the budgeting process for next year, the upgrades to that crosswalk that were suggested in the traffic engineer's report. Just to improve or pedestrian safety.
Thank you. Councillor Todd will second Councillor Draplin's motion. And a question.
I'm just wondering what you mean about moving the stop sign, because they moved that line out further, that stop line, when they put the bollards in up there, correct? And with taking the bollards out on that right-hand turn, why would we have to move that line back in? The stop sign.
Is on the road now. It's not on the sidewalk. So if
Oh,
we
of
remove
course.
the bollards,
Right,
then
right. Gotcha.
So there is another motion on the table, and I was curious, does anybody have any questions? Not seeing anything, we will call the vote then. All those in favor, and this too shall be carried. And I think that cleans up that wee bit of a mess. So we'll go to 4.8. Mr. Ackerman, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to take the opportunity to bring council up to speed on some of the water conservation measures that we've taken so far in town. As I think all of us have seen in recent media events, we're in an extended drought in the Okanagan to levels that we haven't seen historically. And that's something that the city's been monitoring on a regular basis. We did enter our stage 2 water conservation steps back on June 4th, and we did see an overall reduction in consumption, and we've been monitoring that closely. As we continue to go with extended periods without precipitation, we've been monitoring the provincial drought rating for the Okanagan. We've just entered our second week at a level 5 drought rating. That's the highest drought rating for the province. So ourself and the Nicola area are currently in that status. So we are continuing to monitor where we're at with Silver Star Lakes. Currently, we're sitting at 90% capacity of our reservoirs up on the hill that feed Fortune Creek. We started releasing from the lakes on August the 5th, and we're just releasing at 45 liters per second currently, just to help maintain our current demands and feed some additional flow into Fortune Creek. We're going to continue to monitor that over the coming weeks, but we are getting close to a trigger to go to a stage 3 water restriction. So we'll do that in consultation with the province and with our overall demand coming from daily usage from the water treatment plant. So there will be ongoing monitoring with that. We expect that we will be in drought conditions well into the fall. At this point, I'm anticipating September and October will remain significantly dry when we look at the longer term forecast. And hopefully our winter snowpack increases this year, as well as some precipitation. But we are looking to not draw down our water reservoir as low as we have in years past, just to ensure that we do have the ability to reach both of those reservoirs up to full pool for the 2027 season, just not having any assurances of what Mother Nature might provide us. The other one that I'll touch base with is our spray irrigation program. This came to an end effective August 6th, when our irrigation reservoir for spray irrigation, our treated effluent, reached 12% capacity. We only filled the capacity of the reservoir this year up to 60%. What we're seeing there is, again, continued drought. Water conservation steps have, an effect. We're seeing less influent flows, and as a result, there's less available water for the spray irrigation customers. We do lose a significant amount through the summer months to evapotranspiration on that body of water. So we have wrapped that up for the year. Obviously, we're pretty close, about 4 weeks earlier of an end of the season this year than in years past. So we are reviewing that program as we enter into 2027 and reviewing allotments with our spray irrigation customers, that the allotments will be provided based upon what we have available in the reservoir at the start of the spray irrigation season, just to help manage that resource a little bit better. And but yeah, it's unprecedented times, and we'll do our best to manage and make sure that we have that available resource, and not be reactive and be proactive to ensure that we have some consistency as we move through. With that, I can answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Worship. I think, first of all, just thank you to you and your team for managing our water. I think we put a lot of effort into that in the city of Armstrong, and that's coming to fruition now as we look at some of the regions around us and some of the drastic measures that they're having to take so that they can maintain their water resources. A question that I had that you answered, but I also just want to highlight it again to everyone listening, is that proactive approach. Not only are we looking at the reservoir levels for this year, but anticipating into next year, right? Because part of this ongoing drought, the problem is that we aren't getting that snowpack to refill our reservoirs to what we have been historically. So thank you for considering that. And so the trigger to a stage 3 isn't just related to our 90% capacity or whatever the trigger point is when you kind of, for our drawdown, but you're considering what we're anticipating the restock of that over the winter to be, so that we're in an okay position next year as well. But I think this goes way beyond just our management this year and into our education and our Make Water Work projects, and that we've done for years now. And I think makes it feel like we're in a pretty good shape compared to our neighbors. So thank you.
Yeah, through your worship, and through to Brad. Brad, can you just refresh my memory? We have 2 reservoirs, North and South Silver Star Lakes. When we draw down our reservoirs, are we drawing them both down concurrently, or are we drawing only one down and leaving the other one at capacity?
Yeah, through your worship, they are connected, and as we draw them down, they typically come down at that same level. Yeah. So we do that in a controlled manner as best we can. We're not at the point where we have active flow monitoring up there. That will be something for future budget consideration, but staff go up on a weekly basis and take that measure, make a manual adjustment to the outflow, and we're about a 15-hour return when we see that come down. So we operate off the premise of, we know our reservoirs empty quicker than they replenish. And so we monitor that, what we have leaving in the plant on a daily basis, just to make sure that if we're seeing continual spikes, we will look to take those additional steps to bring that down, to preserve that resource to where we can manage it.
Yeah, I also would say thanks to staff and for council for the decisions, the fact that we still got water up there. And that was after we had a big fire that would have utilized a lot of water too. But I'm wondering if we could just put on our radar to talk about, I probably had 10 people call me to ask why they get to water Monday to Wednesday, and then it's 5 days before they water again. And it would be an easy fix, except that it's everybody getting their clocks and whatnot sorted out again. But I do realize that we have to have a day at least to replenish, which is part of it. But it just seems to me we could adjust those days and help people out, because that is a long time. And the problem is they're watering. So when they're not allowed to, I do know people are turning on that tap because they don't want to lose. Just saying.
Councillor Nietzsche?
Thank you, Worship. Another question through to Brad, just on the reservoir and the spray irrigation program. I recall from the late nineties, early 2000s, we were in a bit of a drought situation. And back then our agreements for distribution at those times were that we were obligated at that time to provide a minimum amount of water. We subsequently changed those, but I remember back in those days, we created the capacity within our pumping system to draw down water from Deep Creek, pump it up to replenish some of the reservoir so that we would be able to elongate the spray season for those farmers up there. Now, I know that things have changed a little bit, but I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity there perhaps to create a revenue stream for the municipality to refill that and cost recover and make a little bit of money, perhaps if farmers were interested in additional spray capacity in the future by us refilling that using that Deep Creek capacity and then selling that water beyond what we would normally have. I'm just throwing that out there as an idea for consideration.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Nietzsche. So in previous years, there has been that ability that we can draw from Deep Creek to replenish. That is all subject to approval from the province. In the last couple of years and this year, by prime example is Deep Creek is at historical lows, that there isn't any additional water to pull from. The aquifers are oversubscribed. I do get regular contact from the province and their water authorization specialists on referrals for use for aquifers and streams, and they are clawing that back. So we can look at the option, but we have a very narrow window to capitalize on that, and it all comes down to provincial approval. And I suspect that approval will become tougher and tougher the longer this drought goes on, for sure.
Councillor Drapla?
Sorry, one more question. How are our wells doing in terms of capacity? Do we know that?
Yeah, through your worship, our wells are sitting all right. All of the aquifers in the area are oversubscribed. We don't rely a ton on our wells. The last month, I think we had our PV well came on about 12% of the time to supplement. And we like to try and keep it that way just due to some of the high manganese and iron issues that we do have with our wells, without having to go through extensive treatment of our well water. We can supplement into our fresh water without affecting the makeup of the water composition. And Interior Health is comfortable with the volume we do use of our well water. But if we were in a position in the future where we weren't seeing the flows come down from Fortune Creek and we had to rely more and more on our well water, we would be faced with some significant costs to deal with that high iron and manganese, and we would see a drastic change in our water quality until we made those improvements.
Councillor Todd?
Thank you, Worship. Again, Brad, thank you and your staff for all this. I just want to say that we are, again, one of the luckiest communities in the valley compared to what our neighbors have to go through, and we should really be aware of that and do our best to conserve water as best we can. We do a really good job in town, but we can probably do even better. I know I can. I mean, we can all do a bit better. But we're, again, some of the luckiest people on the planet. Every time I come home, the first thing I ever marvel is the ability to turn the tap on and get a clean glass of water out of it. And there's so many people all over this planet that don't have that option, and we're just so very lucky.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Brad? No? All right. Moving on to 5.1 then. Temporary boring bylaw number 1952/2026. Did you want to speak to that, Trevor?
Your worship, just before we go on to the next one, there was a resolution to receive the report, the Water Conservation Update report for information that we should resolve. I don't know if you have that up there. So yeah, that was missed because it was in there. So the resolution from the report says that the report titled Water Conservation Update dated August 10th, 2026 be received for information.
Mover on that one, please. Counselor Fowler, thank you. Seconded by Counselor Valstar, and all those in favor. Carried, this will be received. And now we can move on to 5.1. Thank you for fixing that error.
Thank you, Worship. So the report that's before you today is a temporary boring bylaw for the Water Reservoir Transmission Project, Phase 1 of that. Council recall back in July, the budget amendment was endorsed, and prior to that, the loan authorization bylaw was previously adopted. So this temporary borrowing is to allow us to draw funds on a short-term basis until the long-term borrowing can be enacted, recognizing that that only happens twice a year. So this provides some cash flow in between and then that short-term just gets converted to long-term when it happens. So this particular bylaw is just being introduced for second and third readings to get that process in place to allow us to draw the funds that have already been approved.
Thank you. So we'll be looking for someone to move that the temporary borrowing bylaw number 1952, 2026 be given first, second, and third readings by title only. Moved by Councillor Todd, second by Councillor Weiner. I assume there is no questions. I will call the vote. All those in favor? Carried. And next we're down to item 6.1. Are there any matters referred from committees, commissions, and in camera? Councillor Fowler.
Yeah, just a quickie. Sorry, I was sort of late, almost late, and I may or may not have been speeding on my way back from Vernon. We had a meeting scheduled at, I think it was 2 o'clock or 2:30 with Minister Green, and it was forwarded to 3:30, but it was an interesting opportunity. She had texted, first of all, when the fire started, and the fire, the Bradley Creek. And she wanted to be able to come to Vernon, North Okanagan, and meet with and thank some of the staff and the volunteers who had been working so hard on weekends and overtime and so on and so forth. So we did that. We had a group of the staff and volunteers at our RDNO office there. But she also was interested in knowing if there was anything that was going on that could have an immediate fix to help us get through things, which is kind of a novel thought to have in the middle of an emergency, but mostly to start conversations about things that were going well or weren't going well and that could be dealt with later. And one of the things that actually we started a process at UBCM last year with a meeting with Minister Green with emergency management about having some kind of a coordinated provincial contact or position that would eliminate everybody having their own EOC office and putting out their alerts and their orders and all that, that we get so many of that it gets confusing. And at the time that she had first texted and then called, we were still doing okay because it was just OKIB, regional district, SPAL, and Armstrong. And by the time she got here, of course, it had blown up, and so had the amount of agencies and jurisdictions involved. So we ended up with 3 regional districts plus Vernon, Spalgene, the whole bit. So there was a really good discussion we had today, and she did say that's something that we'll work towards and have some meetings in the fall. And there was a suggestion that it's more of a provincial thing because it's not just the Okanagan, but she said that there is already something in place that's similar to that for people on Vancouver Island. Not exactly what we're looking for, but there definitely is some movement there. But the interesting thing today was to have everybody in the room and have a good discussion without, the accusations and worrying about things that we can't change right now. Another thing that came up was the ESS. I know for years ESS has been advertising for more volunteers, and it's really hard to get the volunteers. And then we noticed on one of the reports from Penticton that people were 14 hours, some of them. and that they were complaining about ESS. And the important thing to remember is those people are volunteers. And there was 20,000 people evacuated overnight. And to get all of those stations filled to help people get through there, nobody had planned on an overnight evacuation of 20,000 people. So I'm just hoping that now we'll be able to start helping spread the word that ESS volunteers can be trained and be in place and can be on call. And that there was a lot of, even in Vernon, a lot of people were coming forth and wanted to help. But if they're not trained, it's not a help. It's a hindrance because they take time away from helping the folks that have been displaced by trying to train people. So I just, we talked a little bit about Minister Sandhu was there, and not Minister Sandhu, MLA Sandhu was there, and we're going to get together and see if we could have some opportunities, maybe not necessarily have an emergency management open house, because who's going to come? But if we were to couple with events like the IPE and different things that are going, and have stations there and have people involved to sign them up. And the other big thing that they were concerned about is having everybody in the province can register ahead of time and have their information already there, so that when they do it online, more people can be processed online without actually having to go in person to the forms. So every one of us should be already done. I'm not. So we'll set something like that up. I'll bring more information, and it's easy to do. You just have to pre-register. So a few good things that came out of the meeting. I just wanted to let you know why I was late. Almost, sort of.
Thank you. Mr. Seibel.
Thank you, Worship. Just to build on one piece of Councillor Fowler's comments, there have been discussions at the CAO level about trying to get back to a regional emergency management program that we had, similar to what we had a few years ago. Speaking from personal experience, having sat in the EOC as the director during the 2023 McDougall Creek wildfire in the central Okanagan, even though it has its own set of warts, it was a significantly streamlined process for communication and the activation and the support. One of the things that the RCMP mentioned to me was the confusion over communication in terms of the sheer number of entities that were providing information and the confusion that creates. So the flashbacks to conversations that had happened in 2021 when White Rock Lake happened, and here we are 5 years later and nothing's changed. I'm hoping now that there's going to be a real effort to make some changes to that, because it was and even during this most recent event with Bradley Creek, there were the same challenges, communication wise, resourcing, so on and so forth. So those conversations have been happening even before and even during this event. So that is something that's on my radar to keep advancing as well.
Thank you, Worship, and through to CAO Seibel, I just couldn't agree more. I think that we haven't learned yet that an integrated emergency management model is the right way to move forward. I'm just wondering if a resolution from our council to the regional district at some point that basically says we strongly urge our regional district to take this on as a project moving forward, so that we actually get some traction and ask our friends within the electoral areas and the regional districts within RDNO to support us and to start maybe requesting funding from the province to help us build the model and move forward, because like you said, 4 years have passed since White Rock Lake and we still haven't learned yet, and there's still too many fingers in the pie here when it comes to emergency management on large scales. Obviously, small scale events, we have more than enough capacity and ability within our staffing, to handle small scale EOC events from the community. But for large scale wildfire events and major events, we need a regional approach to this, and so I really encourage that.
Sorry. I certainly wouldn't say no to having a letter, but I think that we're on it, and we actually were on it last year at UBCM already. It just didn't get any traction. she brought it up again too, now that she's willing to, work towards it. So if we don't have traction by UBCM, I think maybe we have a council meeting after that. There'd be a really good opportunity to do it then.
I just wanted to comment, it started small. I wanted to thank staff for all the time they invested a couple of weeks ago for what was going on here. I know they put in lots and lots of hours. We drive by and see the vehicles parking. Warren, thank you very much. And Trevor and everybody else that stepped up. I think that's really important. And now we're seeing it spread throughout the whole Okanagan. And we got a taste of it, and there was fear and panic in our community. And I cannot imagine what's going on with the people in Summerland and Peachland and even Penticton being overwhelmed. To move 20,000 people is a significant thing to do. Thank you to all the volunteers that are stepping up with ESS and providing help, and donations are important. And it's great to see all the communities coming together in a time of need. And everybody needs a pat on the back and probably a Gatorade to, their work's not over. We still have weeks of this to go. Anyways, I just wanted to comment on that. And if there is nothing further, I would like to now look for a motion that council proceed in camera pursuant to section 91 C, G, and I of the community charter. C being labor relations or other employee relations, G, litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality, and I, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Do we have a mover? Councilor Wayner, thank you. Second, Councilor Fowler. All those in favor? This will be carried, and we'll take a quick brief recess here.